Hello everyone, Andrew here, and welcome to today's video where I thought I would take you for a trip around a retro video game swap meet, although I guess not necessarily just retro games. The landscape of the swap meet has changed a lot over the years since I went to my first one over 10 years ago, but even to this day, walking around a video game swap meet and just seeing what people have for sale, and of course buying some things as well, is just so much fun. So I thought it would be fun to make a video where I just kind of took you around it with me and we could see just what is for sale. There's always a great mix of, more common items, rarer items, older items, newer items. So I hope that you enjoy this kind of, look at what a video game swap meet is like, particularly, of course, if you've never been able to attend one yourself. They are just a lot of fun. Just tables chocked full of video games from all generations, and you'll always come across something that you probably never even knew existed. And of course, there's always going to be those particularly rare things as well. I saw a lot of things at this swap meet that you don't normally see, but it's funny because you call a video game rare. Meanwhile, I probably counted 3 or so copies of Little Samson. It's obviously it's not that rare, it's just people have it and they're charging a lot for it, and people aren't buying it, of course, because of that gigantic price tag. But who knows what is up with that. Of course, the glass cases always have kind of the more rarer things in there. There's actually even a copy of Stadium Events inside one of these cases, which is pretty funky. It didn't have a price tag on it. It's one of those things where they're probably going to be make me an offer, and if you said some kind of ridiculous price, they would sell it to you. Otherwise, they would just laugh at you. But who knows? I didn't actually ask about it. This swap meet was really good, though, because there was actually a really good mix of old and new things, where some of the swap meets I've been to recently have been way too focused on newer items, like maybe 64 and, GameCube generation onwards, and hardly any NES and SNES. But this swap meet was definitely great for having a very good mix of that old and new, so I was really happy with that. Swap meets now these days also have kind of more commercialized items. There you have t-shirts and such, and there'll be other people selling 3D printed things and coasters and engraved glasses, where back in the day when I started going to swap meets, it was definitely more just retro video games and people who collected retro video games mainly, not businesses or people who were really in it for the money. But just other collectors bringing maybe extra items that they found. Maybe if they picked up a better copy of something, they would bring their lower quality ones to the swap meet to kind of sell them off and trade them off. But these days you definitely do get a lot more people who just get tables, and they treat it more as a business, where it's definitely not as just the tight-knit community that it once was. And that has its benefits and disadvantages as well. It was really nice kind of being part of that community, knowing who you were going to see at each swap meet, and almost being kind of friends with them, and interacting with them on that collector kind of level, where now you definitely do get a lot more people who it's they're going to be trying to get top dollar, because they're trying to, this is their life, they're trying to make their living off of it, instead of just communicating with other collectors and potentially helping them out and being helped out in the process. But that's just the way things go, I suppose. Overall though, I do find that when there are the more commercial people selling more commercialized things at swap meets that they don't sell typically well, people don't really go to these things to buy those 3D printed items and coasters and t-shirts. People are here for the table full of video games like this one. Sometimes you kind of have to look in the back to find some of the older things, and then the front, it's all kind of newer stuff. But this table actually had a really good mix of Dreamcast, Wii U, PS2, all sorts of good things. Also over here we have kind of a cabinet with some more obscure things, like a 3DO, some rarer PlayStation stuff, even some Sega CD. It's just so much fun to walk around, and you need to walk around it multiple times or you're totally going to miss things. The first time that you go around, you really need to keep your eyes open. There's the Pokemon XD GameCube. And yeah, I just think it's so neat to walk around here. Look at this table. You could look at that table for 10 minutes and there's still probably something that you wouldn't realize was on it until you looked at it, again later on. And of course, this swap meet takes place inside a skating rink, because what's more Canadian than having a video game swap meet in a skating rink? Probably, having it inside of Tim Hortons is the only way to get any more Canadian than that. Here we go, another glass case with some of the rarer things in it. One thing I noticed about this swap meet is that there was a lot of Mega Man games. For a while, I hadn't been seeing many Mega Man games out there. But for some reason, this swap meet, it seemed like almost every table had, some of the rarer Mega Man games. Mega Man X2, Mega Man 5, even the original Mega Man game. So it was neat seeing so many of those around. Of Of course, you know, the only Mega Man game I really need still is like Mega Man 7 for Super Nintendo, but that is just one that has gotten so expensive these days. Just play it for the Famicom. Also here, or Super Famicom rather, we have some Amiibos. Amiibos definitely not the giant commodity that they were back in the day. But yeah, you still find them around at swap meets, and then you always need to remember to check underneath tables, because you just never know what you'll find when you look down, because everyone is so busy focusing on what's on top that you can find some really good items hidden underneath that everyone else has missed because they're just not paying attention. This table, of course, also had some TurboGrafx and PC Engine, two very fun consoles to collect for, but two very expensive consoles to collect for as well. Also, again, another case here with some rarer stuff in it. It's always nice too, because I mean, I guess they don't have to worry about it being stolen, and you also don't have to worry about people's hands getting all over it and potentially wrecking the labels. I just love boxes like this, you know, of NES games just packed in there. I think that NES games look so nice when they're all kind of, you know, bundled together like that. Even some Chinese NES games there, which is pretty neat. And just a whole bunch of bins of crazy things. Of course, Pokemon cards. If it's, you know, at all related to video games, you will find it at the swap meet. Sometimes even if it's not related to video games at all, you'll still find it mixed in at the swap meet. This table in particular had a whole bunch of import items. Super Famicom, original Famicom, even like Japanese DS and 3DS. I don't think that import stuff sells super well at swap meets. I've never seen that many people go crazy over it. Also, right here we have Puyo Puyo, of course, from Miles Luigi. But I mean, nobody really wants to buy games that they can't read. And I mean, I guess there's rare exceptions, like I was mentioning. You know, I have Rockman 7 on Super Famicom because Mega Man 7 on Super Nintendo is just so expensive. But at the same time, to bring massive amounts of Japanese stuff like that, I definitely did not see many people going after it. I don't think that too many people desire, you know, Japanese games overall. Of course, other things like Gundam. You also have usually stations set up for playing games old and new. That's definitely a bit different though than when I used to attend, you know, my original swap meets. These days it was all, you know, newer things set up. Meanwhile, back when I used to attend swap meets, you know, like I said over 10 years ago, it was usually more obscure console setup. Like I remember the very first swap meet I ever went to, there was a Super Graphics setup. So that was so cool to be able to try because I didn't own one back in the day. But yeah, swap meets, like I said lately, also have things like, you know, mugs, guys drawing art and stuff. No one really stops by these tables or pays too much attention to them, because that's just not why they're there. You know, people did not go to the retro game swap meets, you know, to play board games typically. I mean, the board games do a little well, I suppose, but especially things like, you know, buying mugs, that's not people's main intention when they go to these events. So I never seem to think that they do very well. It never seems like many people are, you know, too interested in those kind of more commercial items, and they just want to get their hands on that retro gaming goodness. So that is my look around the swap meets, and what I think I will do now is just kind of show a few of the items that I found while I was there. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this kind of look around, and yeah, let's see what I got. So the first pickup that I have to show is the Aladdin Deck Enhancer complete in the box. Now, for many years I have owned a sealed one complete, obviously, although I never really had much of a desire to open it up. So at the swap meet I saw a really good deal for an already open one complete, and I figured it would be really neat to, you know, pick it up and then I'd be able to use it. The box I'm holding right now is actually empty because I have had it out and have been messing around with it, and people might know that this is just kind of an adapter that goes into your NES, and then you would buy smaller cartridges for it, which would then fit into this adapter, and I guess that saved Codemasters the trouble of having to, you know, produce this part every single time, and they could just, you know, save money by producing the smaller cartridges instead. But ultimately it kind of failed, but it is just another one of those neat things that, you know, the NES had back in the day. And you would never see that on, like, you know, the Switch or something today. You know, someone building an adapter and then selling their, you know, unlicensed games for it. Just one of those things that I think makes the NES such a cool generation of gaming, because there's just so much funky stuff that happened back then that you would never ever see these days. Another thing I picked up, many people probably know that I am going after a complete 285 issue Nintendo Power set, and at the swap meet I picked up 3 more issues to help me along my way in that regard. We have issue number 281, we have issue number 238, and we have issue number 278. So with these 3 issues, I am actually now only 5 issues away from having that complete 1 through 285 set. I think that collecting Nintendo Power is just so cool. I think that it's so much fun kind of reading through them. It just gives you such a glimpse into, Nintendo's history and video games as they have progressed throughout the years. It doesn't seem like many people are really, focusing too much on collecting Nintendo Power right now. So I'm curious if that will maybe change in the future. Of course, I'm not, collecting Nintendo Power with the mindset that someday it will be really valuable. I just think it's so much fun. But I am kind of curious if maybe someday it will pick up, because it seems like not many people really have Nintendo Power in their sights at the moment, but it's certainly something that, swap meets are a great place for finding it, and I could probably easily go online now, just buy the last 5 issues off eBay or something like that. But Nintendo Power is definitely one of the last things I feel like it's really possible for me to find it out in the wild, because just, everything else has been skyrocketing so much recently. But thankfully, Nintendo Power hasn't been on many people's radar, and it's just so much fun to, come across that issue, out there when you're not even expecting it. Another thing that I found in book form is the Donkey Kong Country 2 Player's Guide. This is so neat. I now, with this, actually own all 3 Super Nintendo Donkey Kong Country games, official Nintendo Power Player's Guides, and it's just so much fun to look through this too. Of course I know Donkey Kong Country 2 like the back of my hand, but I look at it and I'm like, if I owned this back in the day, the hours and hours and hours it would have saved looking for DK coins hidden in absolutely ridiculous locations. I'm looking at you, Chain Link Chamber, and no, actually, let's go to the level right now, and Ghostly Grove. One of the worst DK coins of them all, of course, because it's just hidden in that random hole that you have to jump down. Like, how are you ever supposed to find that? But I just think it's so neat. I mean, especially, of course, because I'm playing through a Donkey Kong Country 2 ROM hack at the moment. It's also funny. But that is such a cool book, and I'm so happy to add that to my collection. And also, not just because it's Donkey Kong Country 2, but I particularly like the old-style Nintendo Power guides that existed between the Super Nintendo and early N64 era. So, as you can see, I have, the Ocarina of Time guide right here, and they are the exact same size, so a little bit smaller than guides which came out later. If we look here at the Majora's Mask, also official Nintendo Power guide, you can see that it is actually a little bit bigger than the Donkey Kong Country 2 one and also the Ocarina of Time one. So for some reason, somewhere between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, Nintendo Power changed the size of their guides for some reason, and I really like the kind of smaller ones more. I think that these ones are so neat, and I have a lot of them too, like Mario 64, Mario Kart, what are some of the other ones? Yoshi's Island, of course, a lot of Super Nintendo games had them, so I think that those are really neat, and I like collecting the bigger ones too. But I also particularly really like Nintendo's earlier guides. I think that those ones are really fun to get your hands on. And another thing I picked up in magazine form is the 1999 Video Game Buyer's Guide. This is just such a funny thing to look through. It's like, it's just such a blast from the past. What games and things should you have had on your mind in 1999, the Sega Saturn? I love old video game literature like that. It just takes me right back to, when I was growing up with video games as a kid. Other things I picked up include a couple of GameCube games. We have Time Splitters 2 and Pro Rally for the GameCube. We have a couple of Game Boy Advance games, or actually the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance game in the box. The first one being the Crash and Spyro Super Multi-Pack. Now, it seems like multi-pack games, I've always kind of figured, they tend to go up in value. It seems like, something it was obviously released later on. If people owned one of the games or maybe both the games already, not many people might have gone after this. So I'm curious if maybe someday this one will become kind of rare, but regardless, I like both the games anyway. Particularly, I think the 2 Crash Game Boy Advance games are fantastic, so I think that's a cool game to own. I also now own the Infogenius French translator for the original Game Boy. So as a Canadian, that's totally going to be useful as I go about my day and speak absolutely zero en français. For the Sega Genesis, we have Fatal Labyrinth and the Bernstein Bears Camping Adventure. Oh man, I just cannot wait to jump into that one, but it is in very nice shape and all in there. For the NES, both mint in the box, we have Anticipation, and it just screams 80s looking at that cover. I love Anticipation. It's actually a really good game considering it's like one of the original, video game party games. It's really good. If you just have a whole bunch of people and you're all up for playing something retro, I totally recommend Anticipation. It plays up to 4 players, of course. And Shockwave, and actually unlicensed NES game. So it's kind of a funky looking one. I think that especially unlicensed games are just so neat to have in the box because, you know, they kind of went against everything that Nintendo was trying to do and, you know, did their own thing. So the sleeve is like a custom, you know, AGCI, the company who made it, sleeve. It's just really neat, and I was very happy to get that mint in the box. And the last item that I have to show is actually, again, something that will just take you right back to the good old days, is the Pokemon the First Movie soundtrack on cassette tape. Like, that's just so funky, and I do not want to accidentally risk dropping this because cassette tape cases will just shatter the second that they, you know, touch anything, so I'm going to put it down before I break the universe. So, I mean, I just absolutely love the first and second generation Pokemon anime as well, but particularly the first generation season of Pokemon anime. I have such nostalgic, you know, memories of just running home from school, you know, sitting down and just watching that, and just having so many good memories watching it with friends. And Pokemon was such a big part of my life in that, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. So to have the soundtrack of a movie that I saw in theaters on cassette tape is very cool indeed, and I was really happy to pick that up. So with that said, this has been my look at the retro video game swap meet that I attended. I hope that you enjoyed seeing our, you know, a look around it, especially if you've never been to one. I hope that you found that interesting, and I hope that you enjoyed seeing some of the items that I picked up there as well. So thank you, and hope you'll watch next time when I do something different. So thanks, and see you later.